I was taking the subway. I was about to step off, and I tripped. On the trim on my own pants, my own clothing, not an obstacle, not someone else's fault. My own pants caught my own fate. I struggled to stand and managed to squeeze through the crowd, but my arm caught the door. It bruised badly, and it never healed properly. The wound turned into a cyst. The doctors call it fascial nodule, a knot of connective tissue that forms when the body does not complete the healing process. Instead of resolving the injury, the fascia encapsulates it. It wards it off. It holds the tension in place permanently. I have a name for what it really is, a physical record of an unhealed inner wound. Because here is what I noticed. Years later, looking back at the sequence, I was in transition, leaving one space, entering another, and I trapped on something that belonged to me, not the platform, not the cloud. My own worry caught me, and in the scramble to recover, I got hurt worse. The dove, the bruise, the cyst that never went away. I want to tell you what that happened, and I want to tell you why survival mode is a lie. There is a concept in psychological that doesn't get talked about enough. It comes from a book called Scarcity by Shafir, Mullainathan and Shafir. They spent years studying what happened to the brain under conditions of scarcity, not just poverty. Time scarcity, social scarcity, loneliness. The mechanism is the same. They found something that should disturb you. Merely asking people to think about a financial problem drops their cognitive performance by 13 to 14 IQ points. That is the equivalent of losing a full night of sleep. Scarcity doesn't just feel bad. It measurably reduces your ability to think. They call this effect tunneling. When you are in scarcity, your mind focuses intensely on whatever feels most urgent right now, and everything outside the tunnel disappears. Long-term goals, other people's perspective, your own patterns, and the capacity to pause and choose differently. The farmers in their study knew intellectually that weeding their fields would increase their yield. They had the time, they had the knowledge, and they still didn't do it because the cognitive bandwidth to translate knowledge into action was fully occupied by the immediate scarcity. Scarcity produced tunneling. Tunneling produced poor decisions. Poor decisions produce more scarcity. The loop tightens. Now, here is what I want to suggest. This is not just about money. It's not just about time. It's about what happens to a nervous system that learned early that the world is not safe. The dog and the cat. There is an analogy that cuts through the confusion. A dog sees a car coming and runs. It assesses the direction, the speed, the distance, and moves to safety. A cat faced with the same threat freezes. Its system overloads. It bows in the wrong direction. It stays in the path of what we hated. This is not a difference in intelligence. It's a difference in evolutionary design. Dogs are pack animals. Their survival strategy was built around cooperation, coordinated movements, shared attention, social buffering of stress. A dog's nervous system evolved to trust the pack has its blind spots covered. When a dog runs from a car, it is not just reacting. It is executing a pattern that relies on spatial awareness and a baseline of social safety. It can access the gap, calculate the run, and get out clean because it has the bandwidth to take in the whole thing. That bandwidth is partially borrowed from the pack. Cats are solitary hunters. Their survival strategy is individual. A cat does not coordinate escape with a group because there is no group. When overwhelmed, its system defaults to freeze. A solitary predator's best defense when outmatched. The cat's bandwidth collapses into a single point, the threat itself. Everything else disappears. So it freezes or it bolts blindly and it gets hit. Human beings are pack animals. We are the most social species on the planet. Our brains evolved for cooperation, shared attention, and social buffering of stress. A regulated human nervous system like a dog's has access to the full environment. But when a human being is in chronic scarcity, when their nervous system has been conditioned by emotionally unstable parents, by being loved at school, by a childhood of not enough love and not enough safety, they lose access to the pack. Not physically, neurologically. A nervous system that never learned to trust cannot borrow bandwidth from social connection because social connection itself registers as a threat. Other people are not safety. Other people are the thing you need to escape from. So the human alone in their nervous system reverts to the only survival pattern available to a solitary animal, the cats. The bandwidth collapses, the environment disappears, and all that remains is the threat and the impulse to flee, hide, fixate on what's not present. The human becomes as reckless and narrow as a solitary hunter, caught in headlights. This is why survival mode is not about survival. A mechanism truly designed for survival would preserve the very thing that makes human survival possible: the ability to access, to coordinate, to draw on social resources. Instead, chronic scarcity strips you of it. You become the cat and the car hits you. The loop. Here is the cruelest part of the mechanism. When you are in the tunnel, you act impulsively. You say the wrong thing, you abandon the conversation, you ghost. You burn a bridge. You trap on your own pants and catch your arm in the door. You choose the quick fix even though you know the real solution is harder and slower and would actually work. Then you regret it and you criticize yourself viciously. The self-criticism is not neutral. Your nervous system is always watching your inner experience, not just your outer one. When you shame yourself, your body registers that as another threat, another reason to stay on high alert, another data point confirming, say, it's not safe here. Even I am dangerous to me. Robert Greene talks about emotional discipline, the space between feeling and action, where powerful people insert a pause. But here is the trap. Tunneling eliminates that space. When your bandwidth is fully occupied, there is no gap between the impulse and action. You do not have the cognitive resources to pause. So you act impulsively. You regret. You attack yourself. Your nervous system tightens. Next time, the tunnel is even narrower. The bandwidth even lower. The space between feeling and action shrinks to zero. This is why just being more disciplined is useless advice for someone in the tunnel. The mechanism that would allow discipline is the very thing scarcity has taken offline. Fascia nodule revisited. This is why the subway story matters. I tripped on myself in the scramble to recover. I got hurt worse. And the wound never healed because the system that would allow healing, the parasympathetic, the rest and digest, the calm, was offline. It has been offline for years. So the body did what it always does with wounds it cannot resolve. It encapsulated them. It built a knot around the hurt and carried it forward. The fascial nodule on my arm is not just a cyst. It's a monument, a reminder that unhealed inner wounds does not stay inner. They surface, they become physical, they become something you can touch. The fifth trauma response. The four classic trauma responses are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. They describe what the body does in the presence of threat, but they miss something: what the mind does between threat. What happens when scarcity becomes chronic? When the nervous system never comes back to baseline, and your cognitive bandwidth permanently collapses into a tunnel. None of the four explain why you can read the books, understand the theory, and still reach for quick fixes. None of them explain why you avoid the complex systematic problem in favor of the band-aid you know won't hold. None of them explain the fascial nodule, the chronic trauma response where scarcity of safety, or love, or resources, or belonging collapses your cognitive bandwidth into a narrow, unimmediate, perceived threat, stripping you of the very thing that makes human survival possible: your capacity for long-term thinking, systematic problem-solving, and social coordination, and producing a self-reinforcing loop of impulsive quick fixes, regret, self-attack, and further nervous system dysregulation. This is not a moral failing. It is not stupidity. It's not weak character. It's a measurable, predictable effect of scarcity on the human's brain. It happens to everyone placed under sufficient scarcity. The difference is that for some people, the scarcity was wired in during childhood and the nervous system never got the signal that it was over. What breaks the loop? I'm not a therapist. I'm someone who has lived in the tunnel and is learning to find the exit. Here is what I've come to suspect about breaking the loop. Number one, name it. You cannot interrupt a pattern your conscious mind does not recognize. Calling it tunneling rather than I'm broke and I always do this creates the first gap between you and the mechanism. It's not you. It's a predictable effect of scarcity on cognition. Even the fascia nodule gets a medical name. Naming it does not fix it, but it makes it legible. And legibility is the first step toward agency. Number two, expand the bandwidth. Don't punish the behavior. Self-criticism after impulsive action tightens the loop. It is the equivalent of hitting the bruised arm against the door again. What the nervous system needs instead is to gently sit through the discomfort. Approach yourself with the same tenderness you would a scared cat. We are not in danger. This is just vulnerability. We can handle it. Number three, tiny opposite actions. The nervous system rewires through experience, not through intellectual understanding. If your system believes conflict means abandoned, the fix is not to give a speech to 5,000 people. It is to express a minor preference to someone you trust and notice. I held my ground and nothing terrible happened. Each tiny win is a signal to the body that the environment has changed. Number four, rebuild trust, especially social trust. You cannot borrow bandwidth from a peg you do not trust. Every tiny experience where you handle discomfort in the presence of another person without collapsing rebuilds that trust incrementally. The bandwidth slowly expands. The tunnel widens. You stop acting like a solitary cat and start recovering the dog's capacity to assess, coordinate, and escape playing. Number five, train outward focus. In the art of seduction, Robert Greene writes that self-absorption is a sign of insecurity. The seducer's first move is to get outside themselves and deeply observe the other person. Ignore their words, he says. Focus on the tone of their voice, a blush here, a look there, those signs that betray what their words won't say. The tunnel makes you self-absorbed, not because you are narcissistic, because every ounce of your bandwidth is occupied by the internal threat scan. When you are self-absorbed, you cannot read people. You cannot tell who is trustworthy and who is not. You cannot distinguish between the person who will drain you and the person who could be a genuine source of energy. As the tunnel begins to widen, you can start training this muscle. You can practice looking at people instead of at your own fear. You can practice asking, what is this person actually showing me? Do I feel expanded or contracted after I spend time with them? This is how you learn to discern, not by avoiding people, not by trusting blindly, but by training the observational capacity to see who is actually safe. The dog does not run from every car. It assesses which car is coming and which gap is safe. The four trauma responses describes what you do when a tiger is in the room. Tunneling describes what happens when you have lived with the tiger for so long that your brain has permanently reorganized around the expectation of one. And in doing so has stripped you of the very thing that lets humans survive, the ability to think together, to borrow calm from each other, to run like a pack instead of freezing like a lone hunter. Survival mode is not about survival. It is the hijacking of a pack animal's nervous system by chronic scarcity into the reaction pattern of a solitary one. The farmer who won't wait, the cat in the road, the trip on your own pants, the nodule that stays. But the body that learns to tunnel can also learn to widen. The nervous system that adapts to danger can adapt to safety. The self-absorption that protects you when there was no one to trust can be replaced by the outward focus of someone who has learned to read people accurately and choose wisely. You are not broken. You are in a tunnel. And tunnels have exits. Start there.